Welcome to episode 110 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host Isaiah Bollinger, and back with Tim after a little break, but I think we'll get back into the swing of things. I had events, you had events. It was like the end of event season. I will tell you, I'm good with events until January. I don't know about you, but I think I'm ready to take a break until next year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff coming up, but they're mostly like one-day midweek meetings now instead of like, longer trips and stuff. So yeah, I'm hoping.
I was in Times Square, and then I'd go straight there, home for a bit, then to Las Vegas. That was, New York City, Times Square for almost a week, then Las Vegas for almost a week. That's my max, I would say.
I will be in Times Square later today. So
I just did India the week before and Mexico the week after. So it was like, literally,
Tell me you need a break. You don't need it. Like there's no way, there's gotta be a max to that, right?
So let me just finish our intro here. So Timothy Peterson, great to see everybody. Welcome to episode 110. I can't believe it's already up to here. I'm very excited about it. I did have a couple shout outs. Kevin Reddig is someone who has been listening to our podcast. Darren Mass, who also has a podcast. So, I may be on his at some point soon. I'll see. And loads and loads of other friends who I won't mention again yet, but I do hear from people all the time who are continuing to listen and get something out of our podcast. And so thank you to all of our listeners. I will pause very briefly so that our folks can insert our sponsor mentions, and then I'll throw it back to Isaiah and we'll introduce our guests and take it from there. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance.
Amit Bhaiya, co-founder and CEO of DotcomWeavers. Excited to talk to you guys. Definitely I don't want to say coincidence, but like almost a lot of synergy and kind of overlap of what you guys have done on the B2B commerce side and what we've done at Trellis. And I think just some of the stories you're going to have are, very helpful to people in this space. So really what we're trying to do as this is just educate people, because I'm sure you've dealt with your share of educating clients. So tell us about yourself and kind of like how did you get into B2B commerce? Because I don't think anyone started that way.
Thanks, Zan and Tim, for having me on the podcast. I mean, look, to me, B2B commerce was pretty much, I think it just came naturally. Right. So what happened is, as an agency, we were dabbling in the web design, the web development, and you're trying out different things before we really decided. We were conscious effort that, we want to add some real value to our clients, because this was turning into a commodity. You just do this. There's not much fun in just going through general approach. And having said that, we really, happened to stumble upon the Epicor ERP for one of our first clients, which was surprisingly a franchisee of a hardware store. And they were using a legacy ERP and really trying to figure out how to serve their customers better. If
you don't mind me asking, what version of Epicor was this? Because that's the other thing we found with all these ERPs. It's like, oh, you use Epicor. We do a lot of work with Infor. It's like, well, what version? Because that matters.
This was Epicor Eclipse.
Okay.
I am business technical, but if you ask me Eclipse version, I have no idea. Right.
So it is different though, right? Like the integration that you integrate with Eclipse, it's not going to be like one for one with like Profit 21 or something. Like you can't
Not
just
really. So
yeah.
exactly. So pretty much all of Epicor products, almost all I would say, has a different integration point, right?
Yeah.
But I think the core foundation is same for most of them. You know, the API information. I mean, the APIs are different, but the information which they are passing along is almost the same. You know, to
So
some
there's
extent.
some knowledge sharing and transfer.
There's some knowledge sharing, and after you know, we have been doing we've been in the Epicor space for the last like 6-7 years, right? So once you do a bunch, you start to see some similarities, some patterns,
Yeah.
how to go about it, and that also allows us to ask more educated questions to our customers. You know, in terms of have they done this? Is that something they are looking for? And then that allows us to add value because they are not thinking about some of the questions which we are trying to bring to the table.
Cool.
That's a key point, by the way. You know, I'm sure we'll come back to this in multiple ways, but it's all in the questions sometimes. I mean, I feel like going to a lot of different, you know, clients in different situations, they don't know what questions need to be asked necessarily. They have to have somebody come in and say, well, did you think about and did you do this and why aren't you doing this? And you know, I think that's a role that you're probably filling.
No, that's true. You know, I think at least to us, like if somebody is asking more questions, we feel very good about that client. You know, and when somebody's like going very superficial, then we are scared. We're like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. What did you miss or what did you forget? Right.
Correct. And we you know, a lot of times we really try to bring in, if possible, we'll push for somebody technical on their side to be on the call.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them can even ask, get deeper, because if we have some business technical or non-technical people on there, I mean, they're good. They, of course, they want to know the marketing side of things, or they want to know the customer service side of things. But when it comes to B2B commerce, a lot of this is also about the flow, right? The integration. How is the information going to be passed back? I mean, that's the key. How is this going to make my customer's life easier?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why it sounds so simple, but it's usually not. And because, you know, it's like, okay, you know, you have this data in here. Why don't you just make it go over there? Like, why isn't that so simple? I guess, can you just talk through, I mean, because I think that's something that people just assume, hey, you know, why can't I just make this a small $5,000 project? Hasn't everyone done this before? I'm sure you get that, right, where people expect it to be way cheaper than it is. You know, at least we see that. Not always. I mean, you get some people who are ready to spend, and then I think you get some in the space who just like they way underestimate it. Yeah.
Right. You know, the one thing which we are lately noticing is, you know, I think we are slowly, as a company, as you grow, as an agency, as you mature, you also learn who's your ICP, right?
Yes.
What is your
Yep.
ICP? How do you want to go after it? But more importantly, I think we have been able to a lot of times bypass the budget question, because it's easy, you know, it's getting easier to explain. But what's getting a little bit harder is, why is it going to take so much time, right? Or why is it going to be, you know, in terms of, you know, why can I not launch? I mean, the question is, why can I not launch sooner?
Yeah.
Is it so complicated? You know, what's there? And I believe what happens is a lot of customers on the other side do not understand the importance or the value which needs to be given to a detailed discovery and scoping.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. I mean, people are like, why can't we launch in 3 months? I'm like, we don't even have a discovery like, I don't even have a contract with you. I got to onboard discovery. I got to get, like, by the time we even get through that, it's like your timeline's already blown up, you know?
And some of them would give you requirements like screenshots of other sites and like, oh, this is exactly how I want it. Oh, I want it exactly like Home Depot. I get it. You want B2B experience to be like exactly like Home Depot.
Just build me Home Depot. Why can't it be done in 3 months? It's like,
Right.
you know how many billions of dollars Home Depot has poured into that, you know, business? And they have all sorts of problems, by the way. My wife's like, you need to sign Home Depot. I'm like, trust me, I would if I could, but that's like billions of dollars. You know, that's not a small.
Well, I think you hit on something though, Amit. It's really about iteration too, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to have the mindset in these companies that, you're just going to start here and you're going to keep going. And then 3 months later, you're questioning it. And then 6 months later, you're looking at it again. And 9 months later, there's a regular process
Right.
instead of like set and then wait, like a lot of people think they're waiting for something to happen. And that's
And
never.
you're absolutely right. The goal is really conditioning. What is an MVP? What do you really need for your phase one, right? Because I don't think this is going to stop, and this should not stop if you really want to do it the right way. There always has to be iterations, phases coming in. So let's figure out, what do you really need to, have a solid foundation where you can launch something and say, at least, I put my best foot forward for this version, right? Unless trying to cram everything together and saying, I need all of these features and I still need it in a very short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal really comes down to really see, how can we have a phased approach? I mean, that's number one. Number two, I think a lot of times what is happening is they think the customer thinks they know what they want, how they want to do it, but sometimes they're also not asking their customers what their customers would be wanting, right? So I think that's also a key to understand. And what we have been trying to do in our processes, in our discovery, is trying to talk to the different departments and get their feedback on what they're hearing from their customers, what's happening, because a lot of times either the director of ID would be leading it or the director of marketing would be leading it. But, we want to bring in the CSRs to hear what the customers are saying. And that allows us to really scope it out properly, right? In terms of
I think that's a core reason why, two reasons why I think B2B commerce is so hard in general. I mean, there's a lot more than these two, but one, I think the ERP integration is just harder than people think, right? Like it's
Sure.
not just press this button and everything works, especially because in B2B you have, potentially legacy ERPs. The ERP use cases can be complex. There's a lot of like technical work, I think, on that side. Even if you're using kind of like a product like what you guys have or what we have on the info, like it's not just press this button and go, even with a product, right? It's more complicated. So I think that alone, like the technical piece, is much more than like a B2C, B2C Shopify, whatever, it's
that itself is a discovery on its own.
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Is a
You need
discovery.
real-time pricing, right? Like sometimes people are like, oh, I want the pricing to be specific, but it comes from the ERP. That's harder than you think. We get that more and more now. And it's like, okay, now pricing doesn't live in e-commerce, but e-commerce wasn't designed for that because it's expecting it to see it in, Magento or Shopify, but now we got to like call Epicor or whatever, it doesn't matter. And so that's one piece, but I think you just said it perfectly, which is like, it's a much more complicated dynamic of people. And Tim, I think you deal with this a lot in your consulting work with like, I feel like with B2C, it's a little more straightforward of like, we need to increase revenue and like get more customers, increase conversions. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
The conversation in B2C is generally more straightforward with e-commerce. Like it's pretty clear, and the ownership usually lives under like a CMO or whatever, right? But with B2B, it's like, okay, it's IT, but it's also the sales reps, right? Like if the sales reps don't like it, then it's gonna fail. And then like, is it customer service? Is it operations? I mean, it's like so many more departments.
I mean, I'll just add to this a little bit and then throw it back to you, Amit. But part of what you said, Amit, which really resonates in a way, is that it's going out to all of these different stakeholders, right? In B2B, I find that I have to clearly define who all the different stakeholders are in their communities, right? It could be a certain type of end consumer, a dealer, a distributor, a different type of client, internal groupings, international versus US based or whatever, right? It could be a lot. And what I do when I go into those circumstances, once I know that it's all of those different things, I say, okay, guys, this is the part of the process where we go out to all of those groups and we say, like, what are you looking for from X? Like, what do you expect it to do? What is it not doing, right? And then they all come back with their answers, and they're not going to match exactly everybody's expectations, right? They're just not. So you have to figure out how to deal with that. But it doesn't really happen in B2C. I can come into a B2C client often and say, here's what consumers want, because I can get that data completely independent of the company and say, look, here it is. This is it.
Yeah.
but not
And
B2B.
they're usually like, all right, let's go do that, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a lot more straightforward. With
Yeah.
B2B, it's not. There's
But I also think like what
yeah.
happens is a lot of the customers, they come in from a B2C background and they are expecting the same B2C experience with B2B, not realizing these are two different beasts altogether, right? And obviously, because everybody is shopping online, everybody's used to the same experience. Like, hey, why can't I just have this? Why can't I just not have one-click checkout for my B2B customers? Like, okay, I understand you're used to Amazon, but I mean, how that there's a lot more complications around it. Inventory, payment terms, accounts, user groups. I mean, how are you dealing with all of that?
Payment terms alone is like a whole we could spend the whole podcast let's just talk about payment terms.
I mean, we have a client. We were on a call yesterday with the prospective client, and their biggest issue is frauds. Even in their B2B business, there's fraud happening, and they are like, how are we going to go about it? And I don't know if you're noticing this as I or not. We are seeing a lot of B2B businesses having these legacy systems, which I have no idea how they have managed to run their business for all these years.
It's
it is
we could I don't want to
with no documentation. We
need to have a side chat on this. It's unbelievable. And some of them make so much money too, right? You're like,
yes. I'm like, how?
Yeah. It makes you feel a little bad about yourself too. You're right. Like this guy's out here making more money than me with that. Like, what am I doing?
Well, and in my experience, a lot of these are like old proprietary systems too. I mean, they've got things set up that are just really weird.
Said it perfectly. No documentation, and there's
no documentation.
One guy that knows it, right? And like he's too busy to help you, right? Like,
actually, he does not want to help you because he's threatened for his job.
Yeah,
his value goes down.
Yeah, because the more you integrate and extract out of it, and they're less reliance on it. Totally. There's that. I mean, that's a whole nother political ball game that we don't usually get in B2C, where in B2B it's like that there's people at odds with the goal sometimes. You know what I mean? Like for their own political gain, that it's a different ball game, right? So
yes, I think and one of the questions was was PCI compliance, that we have been getting really screwed up on PCI compliance. We have to go through this through our custom system. Fraud is happening, and I wonder, like, I'm not sure how are you still running this system for so long? I think, but it happens. I mean, that's the reason we are in business, right? If they were not running, then we won't be around either for too long. Another thing, what I see when it comes to B2B businesses is, I do like where it's going, because the goal is really to service their customers in a more B2C world. I don't think it's that easy or that integrated, but the mindset is coming in. How do we make it easy for my B2B customers, right? While earlier it used to be, that's all right, they're already B2B customers. It's not like they're paying right away. They have payments, so, we can figure things out. But I see that especially the newer sales reps who come on these calls, or even younger ones, they are trying to say, how can I automate everything? So I don't have to call or email them and ask them and I can just send them a link, or they can just log in through our dashboard and be able to see whatever they want to see.
Yeah, I think expectations
are changing, which is good to see.
So we've talked about all the problems, and we've gone through that. We've been doing 110 episodes, so we've a lot of problems, right? I'd love to just hear some of even if they're just small little things that were like, man, this really worked, whether it was the integration that you guys did, or just something that like really you saw like, wow, this kind of like moved the needle, or the companies, that could be a specific use case.
Right. That's a good point, right? A couple of things, right? So of course, look, number one issue is integration. That has to work.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
nothing else works if that doesn't work. Like the whole thing.
That's good.
The project is a failure if the integration doesn't work.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
If it's not even more than 100% of what they want, right? Yeah. So, but a few things which we noticed is when it comes to this, small features like how the sales rep can just go in the back end, select products, be able to create their own codes.
Yeah, right? Like self-serve, sales rep self-serve kind
like
of
a self-service portal for the sales reps. has been a huge success.
Do you do that through Adobe Commerce's feature, like the company accounts, or have you've been doing it through the paid Adobe Commerce version, right? Correct?
So we
Or
can do with both, right? So with open source, you can have the modules which will do the
okay.
job, right? And with commerce, it just comes in built. You just have to configure it to use it.
I was just at Meet Magento, and I know there's going to be a lot of people. There's people on both sides, the open source people, and then I just find it's easier. Commerce is expensive, but it's kind of nice when you just have it all and not have to worry about it. Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, look, you have at the end of the day, for every company, they have to start looking at the TCO, right? What makes sense for them? I think both products, yes, Magento open source, if you go in, you can add a lot of modules on it. You're not paying the licensing fee, but your load is pretty high. Technical debt is high. Commerce is a little bit expensive as you get in, but at least you get everything inbuilt.
Yeah.
So it depends where you look. But to go back to our question is, that piece itself of being able to, from a sales rep perspective, being able to generate these quotes, be able to sell it to the customers, and from a leadership perspective to say, how can I see all the quotes generated by the sales reps? And be able to look at that data is also helping them at the executive level, right? On what kind of, how are they converting their own customers? So that's been a win for some of our customers, which we have seen. On the customer side, where, how they're servicing their B2B customers, what we noticed was, there are features like quick order, where you can just enter SKUs and then just, don't have to go through it. You can quick order and reorder. Is something which we hear a lot of their customers love.
You get how about the reminder system there? Because that's something a lot of my clients talk about as well. It's like, it's not just the quick order and the reorder, because that's an action that I'm taking as like, the customer, right? But the reminders to say, you usually get this much every 30 days, every 60 days, every 90 days. Do you want this, right? Do you see more people asking for these sorts of things?
We have not seen a lot of those, but we have customers who have implemented this, but they talk more about the quick orders, which has been helpful for them. And that's a good point, though. Maybe I should ask them.
It's actually, it's becoming more common, I think, in the last year or two, where people just say, I'm busy, and now that these automations are in place, now I want to be told more. I want to be told more based on my history. There's the data, go figure it out and tell me.
I mean, as you said, they are looking as a B2C customer. What am I used to getting, right? And I want the same from this company whom I buy at wholesale, whatever I'm doing, right? Another thing, is to your on that point is, we have noticed, I'm pretty sure I saw, Dot Digital, which earlier was very B2C focused, and we are seeing more and more B2B customers integrating with Dot Digital.
Interesting.
From like an email and marketing automation. Yeah.
That's great.
I mean, I think that there's so much low-hanging fruit for B2B on the marketing side. Let's come back to that. But I think you said something very, very important and honestly simple but underestimated, is just like making it a good tool for the sales reps, right? And some of this, you just buy Adobe Commerce, you get a good integration with you guys, or if it's Infor, we can do it. If it's Microsoft, we'll do it with, we have some partners with that. You can usually, I think, with the major ERPs, find the right partners, right? Most of them will have a good solution somewhere out there that, you don't have to completely start from scratch. And I think if you can make it a good sales reps tool, like that's like such an important, piece of winning the business. But I'm sure a lot of sales reps fight it, right? And I think that's part of the problem, is because they're threatened, right? And so I think it was Paul, was it Paul, our 100th guest?
Paul DeForno?
Yeah, was it Paul DeForno said, like, and he's at like the top of the top. So he, we brought him on as the 100th episode special guest because he does head of Deloitte Digital, B2B commerce, like the biggest of the biggest projects go to them, right? Like they're like there's like them and levels, and then there's like us and you guys. You know what I mean? Like,
And I'm way down here.
we're like
Yes.
we're like the mid-market guys, right? You know, and that's fine. I'm happy as mid. But anyways,
Good space.
he said that even at their level, like he feels like the number one problem is the sales reps not like buying in, or kind of like opposing the sex. How would you describe it, Tim? Like,
and I'll bring up a specific person, because I know this person particularly well, who actually was a top salesperson for Adobe, and she's worked also for Oracle and for others. A really good friend, a pal of mine. She's at the $60 million to $100 million sales level per year, right? This is like rare. Like this woman is like one of the top in the country and the world, right? So
I can do the quick math on the commission, because I know
she does very well. Let's just say
I'm pretty sure she's making over $1 million, well over $1 million.
I don't want to,
I won't say anything, but you could.
but she's quite a lesson in this, because her mind is just extraordinary, and she knows how to get into situations and talk the talk and figure out exactly how to address all these needs on a large scale. However, directly related to our topic here, she has to be happy, right? If she's not happy and people at her level are not happy, things are not going to happen at Oracle, Adobe, and all these other big companies, right? So she now is really bought in to having lots of automations in place and having different kinds of tech and tools available to her and whatever. It took a lot of time, though, because she had to be certain that she wasn't risking anything for herself or for her clients or for whatever. And so I think that that's still kind of happening. There's like a 3 to 5 year window on this, where those people at the very, very top are basically getting satisfied, now with the tech, with the tools available to them, but it's taken a long time.
Yeah, you can't just throw this thing at sales reps. And
No.
I think that the key here is, what I'm noticing is there's buy-in from the leadership, because they want to see accountability.
Yes.
Right? And if the accountability, that's what they want to see, then, whether they like it or not, sales rep have to do it. I mean, that's where it's gonna
but you're
down.
seeing that at like the CEO, private equity, but then that doesn't mean like the sales reps are like,
but then it starts
loving
flowing
right?
down, right? That starts flowing down. There's initial resistance, right? Because that means now they have to be transparent on what they are doing, and the books have to be fully open, what accounts they're working on, how they working on. But but at the end of the day, it's like, it's us hiring somebody, right, who's doing sales for us. We want full transparency. We want to see what's going on. And I think no matter how much the resistance is, a good employee or a good company will always start to have that. They have to. I mean, there's no other choice. And in my opinion, there's another flip side to it. If you look at properly, if you are a very, I would say any decent sales rep, if you give them the tools and they learn how to use it properly, I think it should allow them to sell a lot more. I mean, you have these tools. You can build your code automatically. You can email codes. You can do code reminders. You can create PDFs, send it to them. You can bid on RFPs using your tools, right? You can do all that stuff through your dashboard. You don't have to talk to anybody, and you just do it, right?
Yeah, and then I think the key is just alignment of incentives. If they're getting commissions and they're doing double the revenue because they don't have to talk
a lot of this, what I notice is about education, because we have to really educate them on how this is going to make their life better.
Yeah.
And rather than looking at it as a threat, saying that this tool is going to replace what I'm trying to do right now.
Yeah, I've recorded training videos. I'll go in for clients now and I will say, here's what happens and here's why we did it. And remember, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step, I record those now at kind of the behest of the companies, because, they need that, right? And maybe they don't necessarily feel like they're the right people to do it. So an outside person comes in and does it, right?
I think that's a good example of why some of this stuff is so hard, right? Like, that's going to come into play, just even the training of these new systems like Adobe Commerce. It's a pretty massive, powerful system, right? Like, it can do so many things. You need training, right? And I think companies don't understand. It's like, when you're implementing it, you want them to succeed. You're thinking about that training and the cost. And it's like, they're like, well, why can't I do it in 2 months? It's like, because by the time it's implemented, they need to be trained, quality assurance, like There's just these little nuances.
And to be quite honest with you, nobody thinks about training. I still
Exactly.
believe,
And they
even
don't want to pay for it,
even
right?
though-
Like you put that as a line item, they're like, what is
Right.
this? And it's like,
And for them, it's what do you mean by training? I mean, you know, I just want to go live and not spend time in training, because which I believe sometimes is also not a good use of our time, because if you're not training it, then you ask us the same questions again and again. If you just give us the time to train, I mean, we want to add value. We just don't want to do the same thing again. You know, we want to show you how to create a shared catalog 300 times.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, exactly.
that doesn't happen because sometimes we have noticed there's a lot of people who are sitting on the other side are director of IT. And it's very hard to tell a director of IT, hey, you should be doing this, because most of them think they know it all.
Yeah.
And you should be following the, you know, and there are some who embrace that, hey, you are the specialist, you tell us how to go about it.
Yeah.
A lot of them come in saying like, look, I've been there, I've done that, I know exactly how this needs to happen.
Yeah. I think the problem is they don't realize it's not just about training that one person, it's about training the organization. And for it to succeed, 10 people might need to know it. The sales reps might need to know it, right? And it's more than just having one person's not going to be enough to make this whole thing work, you know?
Well,
Right.
oh, go ahead. Sorry, Amit.
No, I mean, absolutely right. So for them, I think if I use just the sales rep tool as an example, I mean, for the IT, it's not a big deal. Once the integration works, they in their head, the project is there, right? But sales rep is something which is very important for a non-IT department person, I guess, you know?
Yeah, some of those guys are 50, 60 years old,
Right.
used to logging into Adobe Commerce Cloud, and like, you know, it's simple, but it's not that simple, right? Like it can, you know, even
it's not easy. Of course, this is not like an app. You just go in.
It's not like Uber, you know, Uber Eats, and you know, it's
Why can't it be like Uber Eats?
Yeah.
But you know, all I was going to say though is I feel like a lot of these things that I've learned that they're connected so closely, like from beginning to end. Like when you do discovery and you're going out and saying, here are the stakeholders and their communities, right? You basically at the beginning, I say, you know, these people at the end are also going to have to know what we've done and why, right? You know, so it's like, how are we going to do that? How are we agreeing that, you know, these communities of distributors and dealers and salespeople and marketers and whatever are going to actually know what we've given them by spending $1 million or $2 million or whatever. And so if you throw it out really early, like that first or second conversation, people start thinking about it and trying to figure out, all right, we have to fit that in. If you come in later, it doesn't work very well. It really doesn't.
Right. I agree. I mean, yeah, and this is where the most successful B2B implementations are, where we have taken our time and they're not rushing us through discovery and scoping, right?
Mm-hmm.
And actually they are giving us the time. Let's just put it this way. And lately what we have been doing in our, even proposals during that, we are trying to emphasize that you have to allocate this much time during discovery and you be ready to do that.
We did the same thing. We're like ramping up our discovery, part of our proposals, our presentation just for discovery. Like it's so underrated, you know?
Right. I mean, because they're like, what do you mean? You know, I already gave you the RFP. I have everything that you need. Like, okay.
Give me the price. Give me the price and like, I'm done, right? It's like, dude, it's not.
Exactly. And you know, RFP has 10 pages of screenshots from other websites that this is how you want it. But you know, nevertheless, I know I might be complaining a lot about this, but it might sound like I'm complaining, but B2B commerce is a lot of fun. You know, it's a lot of fun. You know, I think B2C is matured. We can do more, but I think it's reaching a point where there's only so much you can do, and then AI and all that stuff is going to come in, which will take it to the next level, which is more B2C's world.
B2C to me is mostly solved, right? It's now, to me, it's more multi-channel now. Like, you know, you got to have your retail, you got to have your store. And actually the biggest thing I'm seeing in B2B or B2C is they need to expand the B2B. Yeah. They're already, you know, they need to get into retail stores and build partnerships and get into Walmart, or, you know.
That's a great point. I think at some point that we're going to have to change these terms or drop them entirely, because you know, we've ridden out all of these different waves and what have you, but really it's kind of like, Isaiah, what you and I talked about ages ago. It really is just commerce, right? I mean, if you have a product or a service, it may have, you know, connections to a pure B2C kind of world, a B2B kind of world, some muddy area in between. So it's really about the product or the service and how you're addressing it. And I know that that sounds like an oversimplification, but in a way, these terms were made in a different era, right? When things were very regimented and separated and, you know, what have you. And it's not that way anymore. It really isn't.
Yeah, one of the mentors.
It's going the way you mentioned it, right? I mean, B2C eventually is matured enough. Now they want to maybe go into the B2B world. And as you look at B2B, B2B wants to mature enough for its customers so that eventually they can go to B2C.
Sure.
Right? It's like a whole
but there's no like perfect, you know, one.
Yes.
And I think it multi-channel or omni-channel is really, and I hate these buzzwords because they're kind of like nebulous, but it's serving different types of customers is really what it is, right? And you can be serving government, you can be serving enterprise, you can be serving mid-market, small business, retailers, you know, the direct to consumer. I think it's really direct to consumer is so much easier than it used to be, right? You can get a store out there, you can ship a product direct to consumer relatively quickly. In the US, right? I think different geographies are more complicated, but it's everything else that's more complicated, right? Like that piece, Tim, would you agree, is like,
oh yeah,
relatively simple, right? If you said, hey, I need to make this thing go and I can ship to anyone.
You know, look, a lot of things have gotten so simple. I'm even just going back to the example of Home Depot. They've been my client maybe 3 times, but you know, it's like over 20 years and they were completely different each time. I want to point that out to anyone who's listening, right? It was retail catalog. They had a catalog, a call center, and then they had all of these like print circulars like supermarkets used to do, shoving into, you know, newspapers and magazines. They had all of these things that were going on. And now, of course, you know, years later, they're focusing more on their e-commerce and which call center is working from where and how that was going. And now it's a much more, as you're saying, Isaiah, it's kind of this completely different thing, right? Where go ahead.
But use Home Depot is not so simple, but what's simple is if you want product out the door to an address, that's relatively simple. What's not simple is buy online, pick up in store, right? Because you have thousands of stores, you have to have inventory. And then that kind of is like B2B, right? Warehouse. I'm sure you've dealt with this with Epicor, where like, hey, we don't want orders going from like our Oregon warehouse to like our Miami customers, right? We want that to come from our, whatever, Texas or Miami warehouse. And so now you start getting, that's where I think of it as omni-channel, right? Forget B2B, B2C. It's like this complex. And that's where I think people like us need to help move the industry forward, right? Because the pure direct to consumer it's already there, right? The rest is the hard part, you know?
I think eventually they all will, you know, converge to just be one. You know, B2C wants B2B, B2B wants B2C.
Exactly.
So one, you know, B2CB, I guess.
It's just like you choose your experience, right? Like I'm a consumer, I'm a buyer for a company, right? Like you just kind of, and you get that, whatever you need, you know what I mean?
It's like the, you know, folks, I think like Steve Dennis says, it's like the channel is the customer, right? I mean, you know, you have to look at these things very differently in a way. It's not, you know, for years we talked about is, you know, what's next? What's the next channel, right? But it's not really. I mean, it's always just the customer connected to the product or service, right? And then we just figure out everything else that has to happen around it. Like, who is that customer, right? They're the channel. Right.
And which is interesting, right? With all this buzz also going around AI, now we're hearing our B2B customers talking about search and AI for their customers. Which again, you know, I think they're listening in, understanding from the B2C world and saying, hey, I want all of this in B2B as well. Which we have started to see and hear now, you know, when earlier it was more about, I just want to search. Should be able to search a product, it should be good enough. But now they're starting to talk about these things.
The problem is sometimes they jump that step. It's like, does your ERP integration work well? Do your sales reps? It's like, if the answer is no, it's like, come on, let's get to AI before like your basics don't even work, you know? But I want to come back to something you said, which is timelines generally need to be longer than people think. What do you think is like a fair, and I'd rather you be conservative. Let's not everyone always says the optimistic timelines just to kind of, because people don't want to hear the real numbers. It is, when you really think about proposal, discovery, final implementation, QA, launch, like, are you guys generally looking at 6 to 9 months, 6 to 12 months? Like, what do you think is a fit? Let's say mid-market, right? Let's use medium, mid-market, with Epicor or whatever.
I would say, anywhere between, if I have to give you a range, 20 to 34 weeks, something like that.
Okay, okay, I'm trying to do weeks into months. So,
half a year.
Let's say
5 to 7 months.
26 weeks is half a year. So
yeah, so that would say, let's say 5 to 8 months. I really think 5 to 9 months is a fair.
Yes,
because it drags out. It's like a lot of people, it takes some
time. To be honest with you, what we are also trying to achieve is, because after a while we all start getting fatigue, right?
Yeah.
Project.
Yeah.
We are trying to figure out, hey, is there a path here where we can do a phase 1 launch, and what should it look like? That would also show win within your team. They would be happy to see something.
The executives, the private equity, whoever it is.
Hey, we did this. And also for our team, they're like, guys, you've been working on it for months. Now look, result.
But I think it's important that B2B at least the mid-market to enterprise complexity understands that, especially if you're building something new, implementing Adobe Commerce or whatever, something similar, it's probably with discovery especially, like you said, 20 plus weeks at least, right? And it's like, at least 3-4 weeks of discovery, maybe more, it's like, it just adds up, right? And then you got to do some design work, right? Like, screenshots are not enough. You can't just like send me some screenshots and like,
I think the discovery part where we are noticing a lot is needed is definitely from the ERP side, right?
Yes.
And they're like, hey, here's the documentation, just figure it out. But that's not true, because no ERP implementations are the same.
No.
And when they say that, there's a problem. Some of them have some ERP specialists on their team, which is helpful, and some really don't, that's where they try to put us in touch with their ERP rep, trying to figure things out.
And that's not as simple as people think, because now you're dealing with another third party,
Another third party who is a little bit apprehensive to give a lot of the information.
Yeah, we're gonna have to bring you back, because that's a whole other podcast, is the ERP, ecosystem.
Apprehensions.
Yeah. But I'd love to just dig into that a little bit deeper with the ERP side. Do you find that there's just processes that need to be ironed out about, because it's not just about data, it's like, okay, order comes in, what's the processes between the two systems, right? And that's where the discovery, I think it's more complex than people think, right?
We think, we have been working with Epicor for such a long time. I still don't think any 2 Eclipse integrations have been the same.
Yeah.
Besides the basic.
And my guess is
there's a client coming in talking about, hey, we need to make sure that the buying process is different for all different customer groups.
Yeah.
Multiple customer groups.
Yeah. And so let me ask, when people, is it somewhat like a product, and this is similar how do we operate, they might be able to use 80% of the product, but that 20% has to be customized for them? Or is that, so how does that work? Are they buying this from you and then you kind of add to it? Or how can you explain that? Or is it semi,
So look, we look at it this way, is like we still do a discovery process with them, still as we are going through this, right? We are still, and that discovery process allows us to understand if is it 80% which is needed, or is it 60% which would work, or 40% is there. It's very hard to answer that, like when we go through initially. Typically, we understand we would do a couple of, I would say, pre-discovery calls before.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course.
Just try to ask them the
It's
ERP.
your best, right? It's your best.
Right, and that gives us a good idea. I would say 70% would be almost the same, right? And then 30% is always customizations on whatever we are trying to do.
But that's the hardest part, right? The last 20% is like, it's so much.
I think this one, which I was talking about, customer groups and different pricing and different customer journeys, we are talking 3 months after launch.
Yeah.
Hey, what are we going to do?
Like you're probably talking just 6 figures of work just for that little, that piece, right? Like something big, right? I mean, I'm making that number up, but like, it can add up, right? I mean, agency
Yes.
hourly rate plus times of hours and weeks, it's like three months.
See,
Yeah.
look, the thing is, if they really, the best thing to do is spend time on discovery, give us a lot more information is always better.
Yeah.
And this is the only way to really keep the cost down and the timeline in check.
And you guys sell it as kind of like a monthly fee once they're up and running as a product, or is it more just the integration?
We thought about selling it as a product, as a SaaS product, where we could charge a monthly fee, but we are realizing that if the connection is working, I mean, we don't do much value add, once it's on.
Yeah.
So we rather, at this point, a lot of times we're just doing T&M.
Yeah.
Look, if we did our job right, I'm pretty sure you'll use us. At this point, just stick to T&M. If there are some who try to abuse you, there's always the case, right? Then we have to figure out if we really want to. Do
you guys give them I mean, you're adding a lot of value on stuff that you've already done before. Do you charge for any of that, or
that's the premium they're paying, right? Because I've done the connector. So initially when they want the connector or they want us to work on the Epicor piece, at that point, I think, let's say, even if I'm coding them 200 hours, my heavy lifting was already done earlier, so I should not be taking that much time.
Yeah.
So that's the premium it comes down.
Are you allowed to tell us what I assume like you generally, I mean, you could probably work with all versions, but are there some that like, obviously you guys have Eclipse down or the newest for like, can you talk?
We have Eclipse, Profit 21, Eagle, BizTrack. These are
the big ones, the big boys of Epicor,
right? And then there's some, I mean, we have been able to talk to Epicor customers. There are some who are just, I don't even know, they don't even have a version. They just say we are just basic Epicor.
I know, I hear that.
I don't even understand.
I don't know what to say. Like, I've gotten that before.
So, but that version, it depends what it is. We notice, I don't know in your case with Infor, but Epicor, if we try to get any information from Epicor, they try to give us a hard time. Because I believe,
it's not as bad, I don't think, but it's a weird, we would, I don't want to waste the rest of the podcast on that, but this was really helpful. I mean, I think we're just trying to educate people who might be in this community so they understand what you have to offer, and I think you have something that's valuable, right?
I want to circle back to one thing you said just a little while ago too about phases, because and giving people wins, because again, that's something that's really important. I found with a lot of the folks I work with, because if I know that a project is going to be like a year long or a year and a half long, or literally like for all of the different things that have to happen, I won't let it be one project. I just can't. So I'm saying like, all right, here's what happens, and we name it, right? We name it, for that particular period of time, for a quarter or 2 quarters, and then it has 1, 2, 3 things that happen, and then here's the party that we have at the end of it, and then here's what happens next. Because otherwise, you're right, people are kind of like, well, what's going on? And
maybe even just a basic facelift, right? Let's change some UI, UX, let's change some buttons to look like something new is coming.
I think, it's psychology, a lot of it's psychology in the business. They want to see that their investment.
A lot of people always think I'm like, I'm very much a tech personality. I was always math was always my best subject, but my majors were psychology and economics, and I do think I'm not directly doing psychology, but that definitely helped me, I think, in business, and I stay up with it, and I like.
Hey, look, my major was applied mathematics.
Math, man, I'm telling you. I mean, I just math in college for me, they was so boring. I gave up in calculus too, because they would just write on the whiteboard. I was like, come on, man, this is like, give me a break here, like.
I mean, you're right. I mean, look, psychology, I mean, for a customer, the key we find just for this purpose, for this podcast is the key really is to not dilute the time it needs to do a proper scoping and discovery.
Yeah.
Please talk to different customer groups. You're within the organization, you understand their pain points. Or let us talk to them to understand their pain points or what they would like to see, and then accordingly help us scope it out for you, with you. And this is just a process we cannot do on our own, right? I mean, it's just not going to happen. We need your involvement. We need the involvement of your different departments to really make this work.
Sure.
And that's the only way to go. Yes, there's always going to be resistance one way or the other, but it doesn't really matter. If we show them the true picture and what are we going to achieve out of it, I think there will be buy-in from everyone, right? And again, going back to B2B side, I think if you're on the B2B sales side, if you're a rep, I think they have to look at this as the best tool they're going to get to sell. You know, they don't have to go to a manager. They don't have to wait. They can do their coding. They can do their pricing. They can sell without talking to anybody. That's the key, you know. And if you could do that, I mean, you know, let's be honest. How many of us hate going to a car dealership? We're just still like that, right?
I'd rather go to Carvana. Yeah.
I refuse to buy a car from a dealership. I said, no way. I mean, I bought my Tesla and that was like, wow. I mean, this is a different level of buying experience. Then the other car I bought, I was like, unless you're going to do this online and I don't have to come and I don't have to negotiate with you and the car is ready for me to pick up, I'm not buying from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is what is going. This is what is happening.
This is what every industry, we're going to move more and more in that direction.
I mean, we have a plumbing house and plumbing houses serve a lot of contractors, right? And a lot of plumbing houses are on Epicor. They are saying they're contractors, and a lot of them are new ones joining in the business. They refuse to come inside the store to buy items. They are sitting on their mobile app. They want, and that's what they started using our Epicor Connect. That's why they built the site for, because all they wanted was for their contractors to order and then just come inside and pick up the items. That's all they want.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with a company similar to that too. I think I had mentioned on another episode. It was sprinkler equipment, you know, for like garden sprinklers, sprinklers. Same thing. You know, the people who are installing all of that, who do irrigation systems, they wanted to just get on their app, get it brought to the site or whatever, right? They don't want to have to deal with going to a distributor's office or showroom or warehouse or anything like that at all.
They probably know what they want, right? I mean, if you're a specialist and you know what
they're ready to order and go. They don't want to play the game. They don't want to play the game.
Tim,
I mean, and they all of these, you know, traditional businesses, they have there's counters, right? You go in, contractors go in here, and the contractors are like, no, I don't want to go in here. Just have my stuff ready. I just want to pick it up and leave.
Tim, I know you have a hard stop.
Yeah, so. I'm gonna actually take this moment to just say ciao and let you guys wrap up, because unfortunately today I have a hard stop and I've got to run to something. So this has been great, and I really enjoy this.
Are you going to Times Square, Tim? Or
I am actually running to a train to get into New York City for a meeting, and that's why I have to do this. I will tell you all about it later.
All right, Tim. We will catch up soon. Thank you so much. Yeah. Amit, well, let's you know, wrap up. We definitely want to have you back. You know, we're trying to invite guests back because this industry is evolving. You know, a year from now, we'll have like new stories, new features from, actually, I was at Meet Magento, speaking of Times Square, and it was interesting. They're launching a contracts feature. So that'll be interesting. I'm not sure exactly how we will roll it out and when you know, these new features, it can take a while for customers to use them. And that could be interesting in terms of like, I think it's really more for enterprise, but like, in the buying process, you could have a specific contract or kind of like agreement with that company at a kind of like an enterprise level, kind of like through Adobe Commerce. This was very high level. I didn't like. They were talking.
I was at Meet Magento as well, but only for a few hours. If I knew, definitely, you know, we would have done.
It was one of the like end sessions on B2B, like what's coming on B2B, and so. I think that could be interesting because, to your point of like being one of the best tools, like if you could do all your contracts, this can really become like this portal that does everything, right? Eventually.
And I think the way we have to look at it is people think, you know, when they look at, let's say, commerce, right? And they look at the licensing fee, but then you have to look at it as it's going to save you at least 1 or 2 employees to trying to do what you're trying to achieve, right? And efficiency, that itself is a lot of money.
Just going back, I mean, I also think Adobe's smart and they're in that. I think they're trying to bring in contracts and honestly, I didn't even think of this until right now. You know what they're doing? They're getting you ready to buy Adobe signature. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, and you can sign it through, just upgrades and get Adobe signature,
That's the goal. That is the goal. I think eventually this would be, they want this integrated well into the Adobe ecosystem, all their
Yeah,
products.
for sure.
So
Amit, so usually what we like to ask is what parting words, advice do you have for folks in B2B commerce? If you want to make it specific to Epicor or broader, what knowledge would you kind of, or just anything that you would kind of leave for the audience?
I mean, I would just like to reiterate what I said before. I think it's important to not underestimate what your customers are looking for and see how you can strive for it. Because your customers who are sitting there, they might be B2B, but they want the B2C experience.
And do you think that people need to go out and really talk to them in person, or you think they're maybe not getting the honest conversation sometimes? Like they're not.
I believe a lot of times the features they want is being decided by the organization.
Yeah.
But is it really being decided by are you really talking to the customers or what they would like to see or what are their pain points, right? I think if they could spend a little bit more time on that through surveys, phone calls, or even just talking to a few, some user groups, whatever you need to do to just make sure as you do this, you're not, neglecting.
I have a theory that they're almost scared to do that level of deepness because they might be scared to find out what they come back with.
That's true, 100%. And maybe the leadership does not want to hear it,
That's what I'm saying, right? And so, especially if it's not what they think, right? And so
that's the key, right? I mean, if we can do that, I think that just makes it so then the project success is you won half of the battle because you're building it for your customers. You're not building it for the leadership.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I would say. And then, just spend a little bit more time on what you need, features. There's so much there. ERP, no two ERP integrations are the same.
Yeah.
And you need to have.
I think that's really important advice. Like, don't just because, I have this and someone tells you that I can just plug this in. It's never as simple as just dropping this little thing, especially if you want a good experience, right?
Correct. Yeah. If you want good, if you don't want less lag, I mean, there's still people who are running an AS400 and they're trying to do flat file import, export, but
then they want real-time pricing and like.
And it's like, how do you go achieve all that? But that's the only thing I would say, man. I mean, there's so much more, which is, as you said, this is an evolving space. I look at every 3 months, something new is happening.
For sure.
And whenever we talk to, I think every customer whom we talk to brings us a question which we have not heard before, which is a good thing because everybody is thinking in that direction.
Well, that's why I think B2B commerce is so interesting because like you're learning so much. With B2C, I hear a lot of the same things, right? And so that's where in B2C, honestly, we feel like it's more creative and marketing because that's where they need to. The technology is getting so good that we need to use the creative and marketing to accelerate them.
Right.
Whereas in B2B, there's still so much process technology that
B2B is still very process oriented, very tech heavy, right? That's the part where let's just say as an agency can add a lot more value, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to B2C, I think the Shopify's and the big commerce of the world have it down packed at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Unless you're like, obviously if you're Fortune 500, like there's a whole different ballgame, right? Like Home Depot, whatever, but they're gonna have their own custom teams anyways. Like they're already, that's
true. I mean, at that point, they might use us to experiment.
Yeah, it's like they can hire agencies to get like they have so much money and ability to find solutions. So I really like the small mid-market because those are the guys that they got to do it right the first time or the second time. They can't make a lot of mistakes, right? They can't afford to experiment to the level.
Exactly. And that's why when you can afford to make a lot of mistakes, let's spend more time on the discovery.
Exactly. I totally agree.
Sorry, I had to move. I think the light.
No. I think we're
I'll just end on one note. From my perspective, we have a client. It is a pretty big company who went through an RFP process And our goal really is before we even give you from numbers and timelines, we want at least 4 pre-discovery calls with you, and we are not even charging them for it.
Yeah.
You think we are the company you want to work with, and you feel that we have the chops, we need a few more calls with you to really get into the
I
detail.
totally agree. And I also think that companies need to understand, like, you know, you shouldn't just have a call and expect a bunch of good quotes. They're gonna be crap quotes.
Yes.
You know? And so
which is still true. Still a lot of them expect that. Hey, we
Yeah.
did this, where's my
Yeah.
code?
You're just shooting in the dark after one call. But if it's a bigger project, bigger company, complexity, I agree. 4 or 5 calls. I mean, it might be worth having 10 calls if it's the right fit and the right, you know, you're a good fit for them. They're good. Like, it's worth it to spend that upfront time. Yeah, eventually you got to charge its discovery, right? And so, I totally agree. Well, Amit, this was amazing to have you on. We'll definitely want to have you back, and I'm sure we'll be having, you know, more evolved. We'll talk about contracts, all these new features that'll be out in a year, you know.
And if you're here for NRF, if you're coming to New York City, let's meet up.
I think I'm done for events this year. I'm already starting my 2024 event strategy. I'm already on to next year, so I will definitely see you at a bunch of 2024 events. That I promise you.
All right. Take care and have a good weekend.
All right, Amit. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
All right. Bye.